Hello and welcome to the SEO Andy podcast with me, Andy Kinsey. And today we've got a special podcast. Today we will be running through the May 2022 Google update. As of 9 a.m, Google have announced that the update is complete. Now, I take that with a bit of pinch of salt because there is still a bit of fluctuation out there. And that's not least because we know of probably 2 or 3 smaller updates that are going on at the same time. And with that said, we also know that it's entirely possible that these updates have happened on purpose at the same time to conflate what is happening with the broad core update. So everything I say here about visibility changes and ranking changes, take it with a bit of pinch of salt. These numbers will vary, and they'll vary from site to site. Where you check it, your own rankings will vary, and you won't know if it's a broad core update, a non-broad core update, one of the site-specific updates, or indeed because your tracking isn't quite working accurately. But the reality is we've had the broad core update, which is pretty content-specific, as we'll discover in a second. We've had search result specific updates. For example, we spoke last week about FAQs becoming more predominant and also more video becoming predominant. We now have a meta title update, which is around international languages, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But we've also got recently we've had the product review update, and it looks like they've rolled out a refresh of that as well, although it seems quite a light refresh and it may well have been rolled into the broad core update. So with that said, let's have a look at what we believe is in this broad core update and who the initial winners and losers are. We'll know much more, as I've said previously, probably in a month or two's time, but by which point there'll probably be another broad core update. So let's have a look at what we know so far. So there has been significant movement across reference websites, but also across directories who have generally lost out, and auto websites have generally lost out. But another section where we've seen a great deal of movement, both up and down, is e-commerce. Now, in general, big brands, I should say, have generally won here, although this isn't always the case. Now, low quality websites, such as third-party sellers, dropship websites, and those with just manufacturer descriptions, for example, have generally lost out heavily. But also where they are using, for example, third-party images, or there is just really bad navigation or directory setup, so the site structure is just really bad, then they've just been really badly hit. And an example of this is YouBuy, who are offering products from the US into the UK, and it's just a really bad setup they've got. An example of content that isn't amazing is Screwfix and also Dunelm, and these are quite big brands here in the UK, and they have just been hit, I suspect, because the overall content isn't amazing. Although, again, it could be site structure is just too deep in parts, and so parts of the website have just been hit, and it's just showing up as an overall hit for them, but it could be quite specific parts. Now, on the other hand, we've seen great big movements as well for lyrics and band websites. Again, this is low quality content in reality. There's very little to these websites, and it's just a big kind of congealed mess of here's some lyrics, quite easy to find, ta-da. And then we've got the news websites. Now, these should be quite easy to categorise, but quite often they're not. It's a bit of a mess. They're in 17 different categories, and so things need to be made easy for consumers, but it's not always the case. And so the likes of the Daily Mail and the Guardian have heavily lost out this time round. And on the other hand, the likes of the Independent this time got a boost. So if we look at visibility indexed, the Daily Mail on its mobile site went from around 100 to around 80, whereas conversely the Independent went from around 50 to around 80. So it's a big change that's gone on here, and it's not all to do with content, though part of it is mainly to do with site structure in my view, both in terms of the way the directories are set out, in terms of topics and getting users from A to B, but also how the content is set out and making it accessible. The other thing that has been pointed out by the head of SEO at Idealio, Moll, is that the Independent, for example, and the 100 biggest winners and losers that he found, is that most of these websites have video on them. They tend to be more specialised in the content they're producing on these pages, and they're better matching the user intent. So it's less generic content, and certainly when you think about the Daily Mail versus the Independent, if you know these newspapers, you'd think social media clickbaity for the Daily Mail versus long read for the Independent, and that's just the kind of feeling you get there, and you think actually it makes sense that some of the search might drop off over time for the Daily Mail. So who are the winners and losers of the not so big brands, as in the not e-commerce, for the UK? And what can we learn from this? So, excuse me, in the UK, big winner is makeup.uk, and take this with a bit of a pinch of salt. It's up by 473%, but it went from 0.43 to 2.5. And that's why you take these numbers with a bit of a pinch of salt wherever you see I've grown by 473%. So makeup is in one of the hardest e-commerce selling areas in the world. It's in makeup, it's in perfume, it's against some of the biggest brands that there is out there. So it's not going to rank number one tomorrow. But the reality is that by growing like that, it's shown that it's got quality of content, it's probably got its own images, and it's not using, for example, manufacturers' descriptions. And it's also probably building some really good links outside of that, although that's not part of this. And it's getting people from A to B, and it's got a good user experience. So, well done to them. We've got a Fife University, Cardiff students, all of them with really good user experience. One auto website that's bucked the trend here is Car Supermarket. I believe in the last couple of months, maybe last year, they've relaunched their website, and they've gone from 0.5 to 1.66. That's a 200% increase in visibility. That's huge. Imperial College Union, they've grown 188%. It's quite a niche website, quite a niche area, but it's huge for them. And then the likes of Childline has grown by 161%. For a charity to grow like that, that's huge as well. The other website that has grown by a huge amount is, if you bear me 2 seconds, is the Norfolk Archaeology Trust. And that's grown by a whopping 400% from 1.8 to 9.3. Now, this again is down to authority and down to the type of website, how much information they've got there, the type of information, how the website's laid out, and how they're delivering this information. It is superb, that website, and it's Norfolk, North, Norf, archtrust.org.uk. If you want to see how a website should be laid out and the information on it, go to that website, norfarchtrust.org.uk. I'll put a link in the show notes. Biggest losers. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole list here, but this includes websites such as Lumen Learning, Circle Health, Kiddle, Best Reviews Guide, which I expected to lose even more than it did because it is such low quality. It goes back to the product review stuff we've already spoke about. YouBuy, which we've spoke about. Muckrack, which is getting up there with the most unusable websites I've ever been on. Irish Times is a bit like the Daily Mail in terms of how its topics and categories are not really findable. And interestingly, Duolingo has lost almost 50% of visibility. Now, this may be partly to do with the user experience on the website and how they've attempted to change it over the past couple of years to do with COVID. But we'll come back to this a little bit later in terms of how accessible parts of the website are and how actually this 50% is more likely to not be a whole website, but parts of the website. So these numbers, as we've said before, can be a little bit strange in telling a story. We also see Auto Uncle hit by almost 50%, and Sites Like, which is basically comparing sites and saying, oh, what sites are in this category, and it's a bit of a site directory, hit by 50%. Now, of the big brands, we see the biggest website, Amazon, grow from 2,800 in the visibility index to 3,100. This is huge, and it basically shows that they're still the king of the pile. We then see eBay grow by 200 to 1,200. YouTube grows by 90 to 660. Etsy grows by 70 to 650. Instagram grows by 630. I suspect this is to do with unique content and people using this more for marketing. Apple has grown by 50 to 175. Quora has gone from 50 to 91. Now, the reason Quora is important here is Quora almost died, for want of a better phrase, in some recent updates, because a bit like other article websites and other user-generated content websites, in the last 5 years, Google has basically killed them off because it doesn't want high user-generated content with low quality in there. It wants high-quality content, and that's what this update's about too. So Quora over the past few years has moved to a less is more, and you've got to generate high-worth content on their website. So it started merging questions. It will force you to merge a question if you misunderstand what it's saying, and also there are more moderators on there to merge questions as well. But it's also now started paying really nice amounts of money to people for their spaces on there. And also answering questions in general if you become a creator and you create them some real value. So instead of it just paying everyone, it only pays certain people. And that means that actually it's now become a bit of a creator's heaven. And it's really nice on there. So this is their payback, I suppose, of creating some good content rather than just we're going to answer every question in the world, which they still do, but they put the really good content up front to Google. We also see Cambridge.org has gone to over 1,000 again. IMDb has grown to nearly 1,200. Goodreads has grown. The Independent, as we mentioned earlier, has grown. And Healthline, again, likely to do with COVID and smallpox, has grown. So, and all of these have in common, they're easy to navigate, they're easy to search, and users can get the information they want. The biggest losers all have in common, they're really hard to navigate, and most of them have really bad content. So Britannica, good content, bad to navigate. Daily Mail, bad navigation and often crap content because it's clickbaity. Vocabulary, good content, crap navigation. Best reviews, crap content and crap navigation. Dunelm and Screwfix, we've been through earlier. Shutterstock, generally bad across the board. And then the free dictionary is like vocabulary, good content, crap navigation. Interested to see TripAdvisor lose 20 index points here from 302 to 280. Now, this could just be some fluctuation, it could just be certain areas. It'll be interesting to see this broken down. So I'm kind of loath to say, but I suspect it's just to do with content here and people's reviews, because they can be a bit samey and they've been accused of allowing anyone to review. So it's a bit like those product reviews we've spoken about previously. So it could be a conflated thing here. Lyrics.com hit by 20%. Dictionary.com, as with the others. BBC here goes from 327 to 300. Big hit for the BBC. Again, but they've just recently changed the navigation after this update rolled out, so it'd be interesting to see how that moves. But it can be quite a complicated multi-level navigation in this. The Standard, which is a London-based newspaper, goes from 38.3 to 23.5. Now, the Standard is a bit like wants to be the Daily Mail / crossed with the Independent. It doesn't really know what it wants, in my view. It has to go one way or the other, and I think this will teach it a lesson. And BBC Good Food is another loser here, losing 15 points from 170 to 155. I think really BBC Good Food has almost lost its way. It's cutting its nose off to spite its face in that no one really knows which way, again, it wants to go. And it's never really easy to navigate because it's not categorised fully. Now, we mentioned earlier about the directories probably being a part of this core update, but there are some speculations that might not be true because it's not truly content, it is structural. But an example that someone's pulled out is Duolingo. So we've got /dictionary, which lost about 70% of its traffic during this update. And then we've got /course, which grew by 10%. Now, that shows that actually, to me, that this could well be content based, because the content within dictionary is probably worth less in terms of this update than the courses. And more people are finding course better and more engaging right now than they are the dictionary. And that's often the case because we've seen other dictionaries hit. So it makes sense that this update would hit that artificially. Or more so, I should say. So it's just a little bit wayward for someone to say that that isn't in this update. So we just have to watch that, and we have to understand that. Just as I said earlier, we have to watch when people say, oh, videos were part of this update. Videos were part of a SERP update, a search results pages update. So, but they may well be part of the algorithm update that says people find them more engaging, so we should increase the ranking of this page overall. But that doesn't mean that it'll automatically get a better ranking on the page because they're just putting more videos on the page. Or rather, it doesn't mean they'll put the video on the page. So it's conflating two updates, in my view. So we've seen what the winners and losers are. We kind of understand why they've won and lost. But in reality, what does it mean? Well, let's have a look at what Sistrix found when they looked at, for example, Dunelm. So, Dunelm, the reason they're a big loser here is a lot of movement and a lot of loss for some of their key words where they were previously number 1 and 2. So, for example, curtains, corner sofa, bedroom furniture, sideboard, mattress topper. They were all number 1 and 2. And now they're suddenly finding themselves 6, 7s, even 9. So they might still well be on page 1, but they're at the bottom of page 1, and in some cases they're on page 2. So this is a big loss for them, and it's just really hard to go, okay, this isn't them being hit by this update, and there's something seriously wrong here. And these are searches where there's in most cases, there's over 100,000 searches a month. And the competition for them, in most cases, is a medium level. So they're doing really well, and it's why they were number 1 and 2 for them. Now, you then look at who they've been overtaken by, and it's not huge names. Well, it is huge names. It's still the big brands in most cases. But you get Etsy, who've moved up the pile, and you get eBay, and you start to wonder, why were they moved down the list? What did they do wrong? But it's also a case of, we're also looking at mobile here, and it's to do with the engagement on mobile. So actually, things start to come together. The mobile ranking is part of this update. The content overall is part of this update. And suddenly, you compare Dunelm's mobile experience with, say, Sophology, who increased their rankings on mobile, and we see that Sophology's mobile experience for corner sofas is, for their main page, I'm talking about it, is a nice, bright, welcoming page with 2 buttons for shop corner sofas and a corner sofas buying guide with a background image and a bit of text. Dunelm is straight to the page for what they're selling. It's about 4 layers down, according to their breadcrumbs, and shows a few filters. It's not very welcoming, and so as a user, it's either going to make you very happy that you're straight on the page, or you're going to be a bit, what's going on here? And also, because you've trying to load maybe 20 images of products here, it's not going to be an instant load. Whereas the likes of Sophology are loading probably 1 or 2 images, and they're loading some text. So it's a much snappier load. And that's what people and website owners have to understand, is that if you're taking them to a key page of your website from search, as is in the case here, a landing page and a category page, on mobile, make it snappy as possible. It's really important that that user experience, that instant user experience, is what you want it to be as a user. You are not trying to get someone to go straight to that first product, and you're not just trying to tell them that it's going to be free delivery or you've got a summer sale. What you're trying to do is give them an experience. The user experience of that Dunelm website on mobile for that landing page is shocking. Whereas you look at the Sofology one in comparison, and suddenly it all changes. So, yeah, you can see why Sofology started winning on mobile compared to Dunelm. Now, there are other winners and losers, obviously, but these will come out over time. Do I have any advice for people at this point in time? So, my big advice is review your product descriptions if you've got an e-commerce website and your images. Ensure they're as detailed as you can be, but obviously make sure they're tailored to your audience. If you can, look at your site structure and make sure, in particular, that your site navigation is as clean as it can be. If you make it complicated, then not only are your users going to find it really hard, but so is Google. There's just no need to make life complicated. And finally, for mobile, put user engagement first. So the example I've just given of comparing Sofology with the likes of Dunelm, do it. Compare people's experiences and ask people what they think of your experience. Do that journey yourself. Search for your product and go on other people's websites and ask yourself, are you best in class at this journey? Because if you're not, you're doing something wrong. You are not the best, and you can improve. Even if you can take a second off your page load speed, you can do better and you can improve. And that tiny little improvement might see you move from number 4 in Google rankings for that term to number 2. And that can be an increase of, say, 50 clicks a month. And that 50 clicks a month might be the difference between you getting 10 leads a month to 100 leads a month. And these are all numbers that pie in the sky, I know. But I'm serious. The reality is that little change to your website, adding, for example, a content network to deliver your images to make your website faster, can make a huge difference to user experience. Changing your landing page layout to make it more accessible and faster for users, it's all it needs. And that alone could really change how you rank on search because it makes it more accessible and engaging to users. So review your product content, review your site structure, and review your landing pages, in particular on mobile. On desktop, things are a little bit easier, but still review it. Because if you can create that engagement, people will stick with you and remember you. Finally, it's not part of this update, but review your checkout process if you've got an e-commerce website. Take out steps you don't need or merge them together. If you've got a 5-step process when you could have 3 steps, do it. If you don't need to collect a certain piece of someone's information, do it. Just make life easier and offer another payment provider if you can. Not everyone wants to use PayPal. Not everyone wants to use Apple Pay. Make life easy for your users. And so, yeah, life is about making things easy, making things engaging, and making your content the best it can be. And you will be rewarded by Google. If you've got any questions about today's show, get in touch. I'm at Andy Kinsey on Twitter. Or if you're listening on YouTube, you can, of course, leave a comment below. Finally, one last request from me. If you're listening on any of the podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, Audible, etc., please hit that subscribe or follow button. And if you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button and hit the follow button, and you'll get notifications for the next video that's coming out. Thank you very much for listening. I'll see you next week.